Oh, hey, you guys. Right. Hey, sorry for the pop-up live. This is a live I've been wanting to do. Um, and the topic is a rather important topic to me. And before I get into this live, I just want to say happily that I found a family that my patrons, because really it's my patrons that are doing it. I'm going to have to put a little bit on top of it because I think, like, legitly, you guys, I'm the worst patron promoter on YouTube. So because I don't promote my Patreon, I literally have like 6 patrons. Most of them have been with me for a while. So thank you guys so much. And I'm really happy that on my Patreon, the money that I earned, I wanted to use it to do something in the community. And I felt like if I waited around to get enough patrons to do it the way I wanted to do it, we'd never do it. So we're just starting with what we have. And so the money that's really coming from this is coming from my Patreon, my patrons. I don't even know the language, y'all. I'm really bad. So yeah, I don't know the language. So, but the money that is being used to sponsor a family, and I hope to do more families, comes from my patrons. We don't quite have the money to cover a large box of fruits and vegetables, like just one. So I'm going to come out of pocket for like the rest of it, but like 70% of the money is coming from them. So I'm like really grateful to my my patrons, because on my Patreon, you can see how many patrons I have. You can see how much money my Patreon is earning. And I do that for transparency's sake because of the fact that I want to be able to use the money for the community. And there's no check and balance if people don't know how much money the Patreon is making. So I'm really happy about that. Really happy. And thank you to Naja, who is the person who found a family for us. And I just want, there's so many of our people, they're single mothers, they're elderly people in our community, and they often need help, especially like toward the end of the month, when that Social Security check or that retirement check, or, your money is running low and you can't really spend money because, you have your bills coming up at the beginning of the month. So it's important to me to want to do that. And I just am really grateful to my patrons for like making that possible. And I hope we can do more. We're not doing as much as I personally want to do yet. But we're definitely doing what we can. And so it's only possible because of them. And so I thank you so much to all my patrons. You guys are amazing. Otherwise, we would not be helping anybody. So there we go. Okay, so that's not what this video is about though, but I'm so happy about it that I just wanted to like share that with you guys. Okay, so let's get into what this video is really about. Hey, Cass. Hey, Asha. Hey, Tiffany. Hello, Fillmore and Sharif. Hey, B1 for life. Okay, so let's get into what this video is really about. It's about the Real ID. And so a lot of you, if you've had to renew your license, you know that you have the option of getting the Real ID. A lot of you may know that if you do not get the Real ID by October of next year, you will no longer be able to fly anywhere. So you will not be able to board an airplane without the Real ID. So is it mandatory to get the Real ID? No, it's not. But it's going to be mandatory if you want to get on a plane. And that's going to have some serious consequences for a few people. But for people like my children who do not have birth certificates, they're not, or social security numbers either, they're not going to qualify for a Real ID anyway. But they will still qualify for a passport. I have a video on what that process looks like, but you cannot have ever had a birth certificate well, no, I think you can have a birth certificate and no social security card and get it that way too. But I have a video on that, and I provide links to all the government forms that you're going to need to fill out for the passport office and things. But me personally, I will not be getting the real ID. I just honestly, I will have to rock with the passport, or I will have to just not get on a plane. I'll just be, you know, boating, training, driving, you know, everything else. I'm personally not going to get the real ID. And I'm going to talk about why that is, because the real ID is more than about a national ID card just for the United States. The United Nations has an agreement. So no, Timothy, it's the federal government that is issuing the real ID. The states have their own state ID. The real ID is a federal ID, which is why it is not mandatory, because the federal government can't make individual people do anything. That's the same reason the Social Security numbers are not mandatory. But what the government does at the federal level is they make it so hard for you to do things without complying with what they want that it in a way it becomes compulsory, right? Like it's optional, but like not really. So what it is there's an extra layer, and it's actually a digital layer. We're going to get into blockchain and exactly how the real ID works, how it ties into a global ID system. This is not conspiracy theory, you guys. I'm about to take you to the UN's website. We're going to be reading over some things, and we're going to show how the United States is coming into compliance with something that all nations that are part of the United Nations have come into compliance with, which is to develop a national ID system. And we're also going to talk about a world ID system that is already being implemented. It's being implemented for immigration purposes. And we're going to get into all that. And we're going to go, you know, I don't do conspiracy theories on my channel. We're going to go to legitimate websites, government and United Nations websites. I'm going to provide all the links. I don't ever talk about anything on this channel that's not real. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not into some weird crap. Like, I don't do any of that. But I am going to talk about things that are out in the open. But for whatever reason, we're not really discussing at the peon level, you know, at the little person's level. And so we have our nation engaging in something, and we're seeing that with the implementation of the real ID, that is part of a global agenda, a literal global agenda, not a conspiracy global agenda, but a global agenda of the United Nations. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to be looking at United Nations documentation that you can go and read through yourself that discusses this, and also how they view the value of people in countries, the human capital of a country. I often talk about the department, or I'm sorry, it's called the Office of Human Capital here in the United States. Each of us has a value globally. And I'm going to go to a United Nations document that points out some countries that are considered to have the least valuable people. If you can believe that they're actually going to say that, they are. And we're going to be looking at some real legit documents here, and I will be providing links for all this so that we can have the discussion. Hey, now, Nikki. Lorraine S., what do you mean, why not? No, so OG Bootsy, passports are not null and void. So like I said, for people like me and my children, or I should not people like me, but people like my children who do not have birth certificates or social security cards, or people who do not want the real ID, you can use your passport. But the real ID is going to be the federal form of identification for United States citizens. Hey, Kenny. Hey, Pee-wee. Hey, Nikki. / real eyes. Real eyes, real eyes. All right, so let's get into it. I asked you that before you start explaining why. Oh, okay. All right, Lorraine. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you. Let's just go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty of it, because I don't want to do a whole lot of talking without showing you guys some documentation, like some real documentation, because it's so important to me to keep stressing. And I know you guys are gonna be like, why do you keep saying this, Irene? And I keep saying this because I feel like some things that go on in the world are so unbelievable that people think that you're being a conspiracy theorist when you share them, which is why I do something that actual conspiracy theorists don't do, which is I take you to the websites and I show you the documentation up front on legitimate websites so that we know that we're talking about factual things. So first of all, before I share my screen with you, I want to talk about the countries that do have national IDs. And I'm going to show you a map. Actually, let me just go ahead and share my screen with you now. So, and again, this is all tying into the Real ID for people who are just coming in. Okay. All right, so here we go. So this map that we're looking at, that's a little blurry, so I apologize. I tried to zoom into it. This world map that we're looking at shows all the countries in the world who currently have a national ID system. You'll see the United States is up here. This is South America. This is Central America. And we're seeing North America and Canada, or the United States and Canada, not currently having a national ID program, but obviously this map is old because the United States currently has the Real ID. Again, if you do not get your Real ID by October of next year and you do not have a passport, you will not be able to board planes. That's the first barrier that they're putting, and we can be sure they'll put up more barriers. And the Real ID is not just a paper ID, it's also a digital ID, and I think people need to understand that. But as you can see, across the majority of the world, people have, these countries have signed on and are implementing Real ID, and we see a list of countries right here. Here's a better visual of the map. Afghanistan, Albania, Algeria, Andorra. It just goes on and on and on. You can see some of these were implemented back in the 60s, 2005. So what is interesting to me is that the Real ID has to be implemented by all United Nations countries by October of 2020. And I'm about to show you this because it's called ID 2020. So I hate the United Nations website because it's always flipping loading. So this is the United Nations website. You can see right up here, https search.un.org. So again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. There is a reason that the Real ID in the United States has a deadline of 2020. There's a reason that you must have a Real ID in the United States in the year 2020, or you will not be able to fly. That is because every country that is part of the United Nations has an agreement called ID 2020. And you can see I did a search on the United Nations website for ID 2020 Alliance, and I was able to pull up all of these documents regarding ID 2020 Alliance, the need for regional collaboration and partnerships to progress emerging industries, the invaluable work of Alliance of Civilizations. It just goes, again, they're also calling it the Alliance of Civilizations. It just goes on and on and on. This one is completely on the ID 2020, the ID 2020 Summit of 2016. And so it just goes on and on. So let's go to, because the United Nations actually set up a website for ID 2020. And so let's go to the ID 2020 website, and we're going to look at the ID2020.org manifesto. So we've already established by going to the UN's website that ID 2020 is a real thing, right? And I actually got to the ID 2020 website from the United Nations. So I didn't just pull the ID 2020 website out of my butt. Like, I got this from the United Nations. And this is the link that the United Nations provided. I personally pulled up the Alliance Manifesto. So this is how they're spinning it. Alliance partners share the belief that identity is a human right. Not that they just want control over you, but that it's a human right. That's why they claim that all of the countries that are part of the United Nations are starting a national ID system. And that individuals must have ownership over their own identity. And then here goes the manifesto. The ability to prove one's identity is a fundamental and universal human right. I love when tyrants try to tell you that them forcing you to do something is a human right. I just think that's hilarious. I can't get on a plane without getting the national ID card in this country after October 2020. And the UN and every country that's a part of the UN has gone behind the people's backs and come to an alliance, an agreement called the ID 2020 Alliance, to create a global tracking system for people. And they try to spin it as being able to prove who we are, because we have to prove who we are. Me having a body isn't good enough, is a fundamental and universal human right. I just find that really interesting. We live in a digital era. Listen to this. Individuals need a trusted, verifiable way to prove who they are, both in the physical world and online. We're going to get into blockchain because a well-known Microsoft has been brought on board to start the first national ID, or the first global ID system. Hear what I'm saying to you. Part of their manifesto, the ID 2020 manifesto from the United Nations, is that we live in a digital era, and individuals need a trusted, verifiable way to prove who they are, both in the physical world and online. That brings in blockchain, that brings in the national IDs, which are also digital IDs. Although you're going to carry it around with you, it's a digital ID. Number 3 on their manifesto, over 1 billion people worldwide are unable to prove their identity. What they mean is there are 1 billion people in the world, and I like to be happy to say that my children are a part of that the government doesn't have a marker for them. They're just free people walking around. It's not about them proving who they are. Like, I know who my daughters are. The kids they go to ballet with know who they are, right? I know who my sons are. The government doesn't know who they are. That's the only difference. Their doctor knows who they are. Their midwife knows who they are. Our family knows who they are. If you guys are subscribed to my blog channel, you know who they are. My vlog channel, I mean, you guys know who they are. So it's not that nobody knows who these 1 billion people are. It's that the government doesn't know who they are. So over 1 billion people worldwide are unable to prove to the government who they are through any recognized means. Recognized means being the means they want you to use. As such, they are without the protection of law. Or another way that this could read is they are outside the realm of many laws. There are a lot of laws that do not apply to people, and I cover this in my Social Security video. There are a lot of laws that don't apply to people who don't have some forms of government ID, right? And there are a lot of privileges you cannot get, like you don't get to engage in government programs like welfare and things like that. So I find their wording of this really, really fascinating. As such, they are without protection of the law and are unable to access basic services because they make it that way. It's kind of like you have to get the real ID by October 2020, y'all, because the states have already used their extension. And they're not going to extend it further because this is not the United States that is pushing for the real ID. The United States is doing what every other country that's part of the UN is doing. And because every country that is part of the UN must have a national ID system that can be digitalized by 2020, none of us are escaping this and still having access to certain services. So they're saying they're unable to access basic service, but what it really is they start making it impossible for you to do things. You guys know I'm Christian. This is like prophecy to me. They are starting to make it starting to make it so you are incapable of doing things like flying on an airplane. And they will add other things to that list to make people be forced to comply with a national ID system. And I'm about to prove in a second, a global ID system, because the UN is also going to talk about a global ID system. And they're going to talk about the first group of people who are going to get a global ID. I can't even make this stuff up, you guys. I can't do it. like honestly, real life is crazier than fiction at this point. Like, we are living in a movie right now. So, right. Well, though the United Nations has access to your ID, that's what it would be. And I would suppose for the global ID, OG Bootsy, all countries would have access to the global ID. And we'll talk about the global ID in a minute, because I know you guys are thinking, Irene, global ID, are you serious? That can't be real. Well, I promise you that it's real, and I'm going to prove that it's a real thing, and I'm going to prove it using government and United Nations and Fortune 500 company websites. I'm not going to do any, I'm not going to talk about anything I can't prove. Or transact. So, oh my gosh, y'all, this makes me so sick. Without proper identification, remember, this is the United Nations talking, you won't be able to access basic services. You won't be able to participate as a citizen or voter, and you won't be able to transact, buy or sell. That's what transact means. You will not be able to buy or sell in the modern economy. I literally feel sick. That is so deep. But that's why I said this is not going to stop with us not being able to get on an airplane. You guys, when you go to renew your license, okay, so everybody has a license. Right now, you guys, look at your license and tell me when it expires. Anybody tell me that their license expires after 2020? Anybody tell me that? If you have to go and get a new license, you guys, you will have to get the real ID. You can get a state license, but it's going to say that it's not good for federal purposes, or it's only good for limited use. Like, I'm not even making this up. That's legit what your license is going to say on it, or your ID is going to say on it. It's going to say that in the upper right-hand corner. And if you think I'm lying, just type in your state, real ID, and go read what it says. Because I'm not making this up. And they're saying most of those affected are children and adolescents, and many are refugees, forcibly displaced, or stateless persons. No, you shouldn't trust cryptocurrency. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Snap Turtle. And thank you, because we're going to get into that in blockchain. Y'all, this gets really, really deep and really, really disturbing really fast. So I want you to notice that they're going to start talking about refugees and stateless people. Stateless people are free people. They're not owned by a government, is what they are. And these are going to be the first people to get a global ID. So for some, including refugees, the stateless, and other marginalized groups, reliance on national identification systems isn't possible. This is where we get into the global identification system. This may be due to exclusion, accessibility, or risk, or because the credentials they do hold are not broadly recognized. While we support efforts to expand access to national identity programs, wait for it, we believe it is imperative to complement such efforts by providing an alternative to individuals lacking safe and reliable access to state-based systems. Let's keep going through the manifesto. Oh, you guys want to watch the video? Let's watch the video. Like, why not, right? Let's watch the video. I hope you guys can hear it, because you know my volume is always sucky and I don't have my mic in here.
The ability to prove one's identity is a fundamental and universal.
Why is she black? I don't know if I want to watch this. Why is the first person black?
Individuals need a trusted and verifiable way to prove who they are,
both in the physical world
and online.
Over 1 billion people worldwide are unable to prove their identity through any recognized means.
As such, they are without the protection of law and are unable to access basic services, participate as a citizen or voter, or transact in the modern economy.
La mayoría de esos afectados son niños y adolescentes. Muchos de ellos son refugiados, desplazados forzosos o personas sin país.
For some, including refugees, the stateless, and other marginalized groups, reliance on national identification systems isn't possible.
This may be due to exclusion, inaccessibility, or risk, or because the credentials they do hold are not broadly recognized.
While we support efforts to expand access to national identity programs, we believe it is imperative to complement such efforts by providing alternatives to individuals lacking safe and reliable access to state-based systems.
We believe that individuals must have control over their own digital identity.
So they're actually reading their own manifesto. That's what this video is. It's reading their manifesto. So now they're where we are. They're at number 5. We believe that individuals must have control over their digital identities, including how personal data is collected, used, and shared. Oh, it sounds so good, right? Everyone should be able to assert their identity, check it, across institutional and national borders. How might we do that, y'all? How might we assert our identity across national borders? We're going to get to that. It's going to be a global ID that they are already implementing. There's already a global ID. So let's for the people just coming in the room, let's back it up. By October 2020, you will not be able to board a plane on this country without a real ID. You can board with your passport, but for those people who are without passports, you will need to get a real ID. When you go to renew your driver's license or ID card for your state, and if you don't believe me, feel free to Google it now for your state, you will be offered, quote unquote, the real ID, but it's not really an offer since there's a lot of things you will. Oh, and it's not just that you won't be able to fly on a plane, you guys. You can't enter federal buildings either. So you need a real ID to enter federal buildings as well. Keep this in mind. Now, the date of October 2020 is not an arbitrary date that the United States picked. They picked the date because every country that is part of the UN is part of the ID 2020 Alliance. For those people who were here earlier, we've already gone to the UN's website and established that that is true. This is the id2020.org website. Feel free to go to it. We are currently reading the manifesto for the entire United Nations regarding national ID programs, which all countries that are part of the United Nations must implement by 2020. And now they are starting to talk about the implementation of a global ID system that is already being implemented. And I'm going to tell you who is in charge of it. Well, the United Nations is in charge of it, but I'm going to tell you what company is doing it. And we're going to get into all that in a second. But we're at number 5 in the manifesto. So they're saying you should be able to prove your identity across national borders, across time. Privacy, portability, and persistence are necessary for digital identity to be meaningful, empower, and protect individuals. I love how they try to make it like it's about you. Not about them wanting just to be able to track you and know who you are across the globe, but for your protection. And they keep talking about digital because blockchain is how they're going to implement the global ID system. And I'm going to prove that in a minute. Digital identity carries significant risk if not thoughtfully designed and carefully implemented. We do not underestimate the risks of data misuse and abuse, particularly when digital identity systems are designed as large, centralized databases. That is what they're going to do. The real ID is not just a physical ID you carry, it has a digital aspect, as do all the other national IDs of the United Nations countries. And we're going to talk about how they plan to utilize that digital aspect because they tell us it's just nobody cares. Hi, Darafil. Hi, Self-Care Boss. Oh, do you have your real ID driver's license or your driver's license? Miss me with that because there's a difference. So yeah, there's definitely like a difference between the two. All right, so let's keep going. The better model of a digital identity will not emerge spontaneously. In order for digital identities to be broadly trusted and recognized, we need sustained and transparent collaboration aligned around these shared principles, along with supporting regulatory and policy frameworks. Now, you guys have to realize how insidious this is, because the ID 2020 Alliance is a worldwide alliance of United Nations members. They're talking about a digital form of ID that is centralized in its regulation and framework. How would that be possible? Who might, pray tell, be in charge of the regulation and centralization of a digital ID? Would it be the United Nations, maybe? I would say that it would, and I'm going to prove it because the United Nations tells us that's what they're going to do. ID 2020 alliance partners, of which America is one. And notice ID 2020, that goes back to why you have to get the real ID by 2020, you guys. Jointly define functional requirements. So listen to this. It's like, okay, you know how each state is represented on the federal level? Now each country is represented on the global level. And there's then going to be a global ID. So ID 2020 alliance partners jointly define functional requirements, influencing the course of technical innovation and providing a route to technical interoperability and therefore trust and recognition. The ID 2020 Alliance recognizes that taking these ideas to a scale, a global scale is what they're saying, requires a robust evidence base, which will inform advocacy and policy. As such, ID 2020 Alliance supporters, pilots are designed around a common monitoring and evaluation framework. Let me just back that up. As such, ID 2020 Alliance supported pilots. Do you know what a pilot is? A pilot is a small scale version of a bigger scale thing. That is why all of the United Nations ID 2020 partners, which is all the countries that are part of the United Nations, including America, are implementing a pilot program of national ID that has a digital aspect by 2020 so that they can scale up. Now, y'all are reading it with me. That's literally what this says. Designed around a common monitoring and evaluation framework. Y'all, you know what? I'm so disappointed that the states, because I promise you, if all of the states or the majority of the states refuse this, or if people would refuse this ID, but y'all know you guys are going to go out and get your real IDs. You're going to go get them because we're all going to want to get on a plane. I'm not going to go get one. Okay, so let me just say first, me, Irene, over here, Irene Yvette, I won't be getting a real ID. But I know that most people will. We're going to willingly participate in a pilot identification program that is global and that's going to be blown up. So let's get to some other things. So let me close out the UN's website. That's where we put in ID 2020 Alliance. So nobody says that I'm trying to tie the UN to something that doesn't exist. You can go to the UN yourself, do the search yourself. We went to the ID 2020 website, and I advise you guys to go to this website. I advise you to go to the website, explore away. There's all kinds of things for you to read on this website, and I really encourage you to go to the ID 2020 website and read about this, because your real ID here in America is part of a global mission. It has nothing to do, it has nothing to do with anything. We need to get digital ID right. Discover the Alliance. What are they doing? So let's go ahead and, so I said Microsoft was a part of this, right? Closing the identity gap is an enormous challenge. It will take the work of many committed people and organizations coming together across different geographies. No shit. I know, because this is a UN thing. Sectors and technologies, but it's exciting to imagine a world where safe and secure digital identities are possible. Y'all, I'm sorry, like as a Christian, this literally makes me like physically ill. Providing everyone with an essential building block to every right and opportunity they deserve, or able to close you out if you don't get their ID. Because they're already starting with the real ID here in this country. You can't enter certain buildings. You can't get on planes without the real ID. This quote is by Peggy Johnson, Executive Vice President of Business Development at Microsoft Corporation. And these are all of the companies that are working on it. Accenture is working on it. Microsoft, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, is working on it. I'm like, I can't with it. They're calling it an identity crisis. And right here, because I'm about to go to blockchain, so you guys don't think, I don't know if you guys can see this, but you guys can go to the ID 2020 website. It says, hackers can steal our data. Tech firms abuse it. Can blockchain finally give us the digital privacy we deserve? And they're going to use blockchain as a way to create a digital ID. So we're going to go to a few companies. Well, this is Global ID right here. Yes, Global ID. That's a thing. Global ID, global.id. But let's go ahead and let's go to IBM. Okay, IBM blockchain. And I said that Microsoft was working on it. Here we are on IBM's website. IBM is starting to work on what will ultimately be the blueprint, or what currently is the blueprint for a national ID system. But I want to go to Fortune. You know Fortune magazine, that the magazine the rich people read and none of us bother reading. So I'm not going to sign up for you, Fortune. Let's go to Fortune magazine. Can we all agree that Fortune magazine?
Well, the blockchain is complex, but the idea behind it is quite simple.
Can we all agree that Fortune magazine is a reputable magazine? That wealthy people love Fortune magazine. They love to get featured in it. This isn't like, you know, some weird offshoot internet something. Okay, so we can say that Fortune magazine is a reputable thing. So let's go ahead and read what Fortune magazine has to say about global ID. Americans can show all sorts of documents, such as social security cards and diplomas, to show who they are. But for those from countries torn apart by war or political chaos, it's much harder to prove their identities. That's why a new software tool unveiled Monday at the United Nations is a big deal. Listen to it, y'all. That's why a new software tool unveiled on Monday at the United Nations is a big deal. It will let millions of refugees and others without documents whip out a phone or other device to quickly show who they are and where they came from. The tool, developed in part by Microsoft and Accenture, combines biometric data like a fingerprint or an iris scan and a new, oh my gosh, y'all. I'm sorry. If you're not Christian, you don't even know how deep this is. Like, you don't even know how deep this mark of the beast crap is. Like, the mark will be, for Christians in the room, in your hand or on their forehead. Is this not like literally what the scripture says? For those of you who aren't Christian, it's still insidious, still be freaked out, but I'm like freaked out on like other levels. The tool, developed in part by Microsoft and Accenture, combines biometric data like a fingerprint or an iris scan and a new form of record-keeping technology known as the blockchain to create a permanent identity. In practice, this means that someone arriving at a border crossing, this is a global ID, listen to this. In practice, this means someone arriving at a border crossing could prove he or she had come from a refugee camp and qualify for aid, or a displaced person in a new country could use the ID system to call up his or her school records. So they could scan your eyeball in one country that you're not even from and get your school records from America. So I'm in Algeria, I'm in China, I'm in France, okay? I'm in any of these countries that are in red, you know, and they can scan my eyeball and pull up my high school records, y'all. Are you hearing it? Are y'all hearing this? They can scan your eyeball and pull up your high school records. You can be in Turkey and get an eyeball scan or get your fingerprint taken, and they can find all your information because you have a digital ID. I can't. The tool doesn't have a name yet since it's a prototype, but it will get one soon. Approximately 1/6 of the world's population cannot participate in cultural, political, economic, and social life because they lack the most basic information, documented proof of their existence. Because having a body and being present is not enough. I mean, think about how much sense this makes. You prove that you exist by existing, okay? You guys know that I exist because, like, Dr. G could meet me in person, okay? She and I sat down and had tea and brunch together just like not even 2 weeks ago. You can know that I exist because when we meet in person, you can touch me and see me. I don't need my eyeball scan for that. My physical body proves that I exist. But apparently, that's not good enough anymore. You need documented proof of your existence. Establishing identity is critical to accessing a wide range of activities, including education. Y'all, oh my gosh, like I have chills. I mean, the wording of this sounds nice, but what they're saying is you need to have ID. And mind you, in this article that in Fortune magazine, they're talking about a global ID. Now, we already saw this for those of you just coming in the room. We already saw that in the United States by 2020, you have to have the real ID to enter federal buildings or to travel by plane. Anywhere, even in the even on it from state to state, you'll need the real ID. We know that the United States is implementing this because they're part of the UN's ID 2020 Alliance. We know that the ID 2020's alliance goal is to have pilot programs in their member countries of national IDs that they can scale up to a global digital ID. And the real ID does have a digital aspect. We know that the ID 2020 Alliance has commissioned Microsoft and Accenture to develop a global form of ID, and the first people to get the global ID will be refugees. And the global ID will work as a digital ID that is accessed through a fingerprint or an iris scan. That's where we are in this conversation right now. Like, we legit are living in an actual movie. This is a movie. Or it's revelations in the Bible. Like, y'all take it how you want. Like, we are living in a weird time right now. It's extra weird to me only because it's really close to home now, you guys. Like, our country is part of the 2020 Alliance, the ID 2020 Alliance by the United Nations. Microsoft is building the software. And we as Americans have to go get our pilot global ID, our pilot ID, according, and I'm calling it a pilot ID because that's what ID 2020 called it, by October of next year. This isn't even like off in the distance. Maybe it'll happen. Is there going to be a global ID? How will they do it? No, these are not questions we have to ask anymore. These people are printing it in Fortune magazine. They've got a whole website for you to go to and learn all about it called ID 2020. The United Nations is having meetings about it. Our country is implementing the national ID system that will be linked with the global ID system right now. If you walk into your local DMV right now, this is happening. And so that is so crazy to me. Like, my mind is completely blown. Like 10 years ago, this was a conspiracy. This is no longer conspiracy. This is no longer, is it going to happen? Maybe it's going to happen. Are these kooky people making it up? Oh no, y'all, we've moved past this. The conspiracy is at your local DMV office, okay? Telling you you won't walk into a federal building or get on a plane without it, okay? This is like past that. The software was unveiled at the UN on Monday. They don't have a name for it yet, but they're going to give a name to it. Scan your fingerprint on your iris anywhere in the world, and they'll be able to access your American information. That is insane. The companies have been working on the system since last year and unveiled the prototype at a summit in New York called United Nations ID 2020. Oh, look at that. Look at that. No, it's called United Nations ID 2020. How did we know that? That's because we were just on that website. Let's go ahead and listen to what these individuals have to say, and then we're going to get into blockchain and how this really works.
Essentially, what blockchain is a distributed ledger rather than a record existing in one single location, shared amongst computers all over.
Wait, can you guys hear that? Do I need to go get like another mic to make it louder? Can you guys hear it? Let me play it. And if you can hear it, please put one in the chat. Otherwise, I'll go get a mic.
Well, the blockchain is complex, but the idea behind it is quite simple. Essentially, what the blockchain is a distributed ledger rather than a record existing in one single location. It's shared amongst computers all around the world. And built into that ledger is a consensus mechanism that allows anybody to transact or do business with each other and to trust each other without having to go through a central ledger. Like the Internet of Information, it's an Internet of value.
And why should we care, Don, about this? I mean, we have systems that work. Obviously, companies transact, banking.
Well, most people think about the blockchain and its impact on financial services. And to be sure, that could be revolutionary. I mean, the financial services industry is kind of archaic. It's sort of like Rube Goldberg. When you tap your card in a Starbucks and this bit stream goes through a dozen different computers, and 3 days later, somebody gets paid. And some of those mainframes are from the 1970s. Well, with blockchain technology, there would be no 3-day settlement because there would be no settlement at all. This is just a shared database. So this holds an opportunity for that industry to cut out huge costs to deliver way better value for customers. And it's not just around transactions like that, it's every part of the industry. But financial services is just the tip of the iceberg for us.
What other kinds of applications do you foresee the blockchain being implemented to do? Down from the most mundane to the most crazy ideas.
Well, I think perhaps one of the biggest opportunities is to completely reinvent some of the institutions in society that we've used to build the modern capitalist system, the corporation being first among them. Blockchain technology significantly reduces a lot of the transaction costs that prevent us from organizing capability in networks and force us to organize them vertically in companies. And so as a result, you get a whole new set of business models, many of which will upend many different industries and not just financial services.
So consider something like the big disruptors, Uber, right? Well, Uber could be disrupted. You don't need a $65 billion corporation to do what Uber does. It can simply be a distributed application running on the blockchain. And you need a car, you hit the button, it looks exactly like Uber, only it's software. And all the transactions are resolved not through a big corporation, but through a consensus community that's establishing every 10 minutes a block of what has occurred. So you look at every part of the economy, every single type of business can be turned on its head with technology.
Every part of the economy, you guys. Every part of the economy. And remember on the ID 2020 website, they were saying even commerce. What's the word they used? They didn't use the word commerce. What word did they use? This is like so sickening to me. Like, I mean, I can't. It said access to, let me look. It said access to, do one of you remember the word? Am I going to have to look this word up? Because I just want to use the word that they used. Oh, transact. The ability to transact in the modern economy. That means the ability to buy and sell things. And I want just us to really focus on number 10 in the ID 2020 manifesto, which is that as such, ID 2020 Alliance supported pilots are designed around a common monitoring and evaluation framework. And Microsoft is spearheading this, and they're going to use blockchain to do it. And so with a scan of your eye or a fingerprint, and in California, we use fingerprints for our IDs. They are digitalizing identification, and the national ID system in this country and the national ID system in all the other countries you see in red on that map are pilot programs for a global ID system. And the first people that will get the global ID are going to be refugees, people like those that show up at our border. Those will be the first people to get the global ID. But it won't be far off before it's all of us that are carrying this ID, because remember, ID 2020 said that this is a pilot. The pilots are designed, the pilot program of the real ID in the United States, the pilot program of the national IDs in all of these countries that are on this map in red. Those pilot programs are designed around a common monitoring and evaluation framework. This is the one I'm reading, but you guys can go to this website yourself. Let me stop sharing with you guys. I have so many other things that I could like share. Like I literally, so let's just go through some. I'm not going to go through like everything in great detail, but this is the global governance and rules for post-2015 era. This is UN.org. Y'all, we have to start reading the documents that these people put out. These documents are crazy. Post-2015 era. Post-2015 era. This is a book you can buy, okay? Post-2015 era provides a unique assessment of global rules and governance, a reflection of how global rules have been shaping development, experiences, and outcomes. The name of the book is Global Governance and Rules for the Post-2015 Era. Post-2015 era. I mean, these people are crazy. Read the book. Maybe we'll read it on here, but y'all, these people are out of control. I mean, they're not even trying to, if you don't know that this is going on, like if you think global ID and global government is something off in the future with people with tin hat, no, this thing is at the front door. They're not even hiding this anymore, okay? They know you're not paying attention. They're literally just doing whatever they want. Our country has the real ID right now because the UN told them to do it. Because they're part of the ID 2020 Alliance. Like, think about that, y'all. Think about the fact that we are in America and we have a national ID system that you won't be able to go into a federal building or fly after October of 2020 because the UN said so. Because the UN said so. Because according to ID 2020, the same way that states are represented at the federal level, our country is just representing our seat at the global government table. This mess is insane. I cannot. Let's go ahead and look at the last document that I'm going to look at here. Again, I'm still on the UN's website, www.un.org. I'm on page 21, but I'll go to the top so you guys can see what I'm reading. I wish we could go through this whole document because you guys know me. I will go through a whole document with you guys. But this live is already an hour long. But you guys know that there's nothing I like more than to read and tear apart these documents from the government, in this case, the United Nations, because again, on my channel, I never talk conspiracy. I come with like complete facts and I provide you guys with all of the links. Like I'm not trying to hide anything and I'm not trying to pretend. So the paper that we're looking at is was put out by the Department of Economic and Social Affairs by the United Nations. It's dated September 2014, and it talks about the classifications that they use for countries, y'all. So first of all, the way that they classify the countries is based on the World Bank. Like you literally cannot make this stuff up. I'm going to put a link to this. I'm going to put a link to this PDF in the description box. But the way that they classify countries is by the World Bank's classification. But on page 21, and here's the table of contents, if you guys are wondering what's in it. LDCs, the category, criterion processes, how useful has the categories, I can't even say the word, categorization been, the World Bank's classification, small island development states. This is why they're, tripping out on Haiti right now. These people just have no shame. They have no shame. Like, you guys, we have to start reading their documents because they really tell you everything that they're planning to do. They know you're not listening. They know that we're going to have this conversation here. 100 people, 200 people, 1,000 people, because I most of my videos like average 1,000 views, are going to watch this video, and that's where this conversation is going to start. They know that when this live ends, nobody's going to click on the link in my description box and sit down and read 33 pages of a UN document. So they really don't care about putting crazy stuff out online. These people put anything online. Human development classification, highly indebted poor countries, fragile states. It just goes on and on, but let's go ahead to page 21 because I've been perusing this document. Let me tell you, this document deserves a whole live unto itself, okay? Like it really, really does. But I'm going to get to, oh gosh. I'm going to get to the list of least developed countries, okay? So they have this list of least developed countries that they're after. Ethiopia's on there. Haiti is on there. Somalia is on there. Sudan, Uganda, a lot of African countries are on there. Zambia. So this is the part I wanted to read. These countries get included and then they graduate. You can see the memo item that some of the graduated countries are Botswana, Cape Verde, the Maldives, Samoa. These are countries that have graduated from this program that they don't even know they're a part of, okay? Strangely enough. But I want to go into the criteria, okay? So this is the criteria that they have. Since it was first applied in 1971, the criteria to identify LDCs was refined and updated on several occasions to incorporate new development concerns, relevant advances in economic theory, and greater data availability. Yet criteria have always included three components mentioned above: income, social progress, and economic vulnerability. Inclusion and graduation procedures have also evolved over the years. The CDP defines LDCs as low-income countries suffering from severe structural handicaps to sustainable development, whose identification is based on the following three criteria: per capita gross national income. B is the one that interests me, the Human Assets Index. Y'all, I'm going to do a whole separate live on the Human Assets Index, the value of your body to the United Nations. Do you hear what I'm saying? The value of your human body to the United Nations, the Human Assets Index, which gives an indication of the availability. Listen to this, y'all. This is how they talk about people. It gives an indication of the availability and the quality of human capital. Did you hear that? The availability and the quality of human capital. There's a quality to human capital. It could be crappy quality, it could be good quality. The availability of it. How usable is that human capital? You would think we were talking about dollars. And the Economic Vulnerability Index, the EVI. I think the HAI, the Human Assets Index, like I'm going to probably stop the live here because honestly, the Human Assets Index is something I feel I could legit do a whole separate live on. I really do. I think I could do a whole separate live on that. But we wonder why the UN has its hands in the pots and is really pushing for a global ID. We wonder why our country has agreed to sign on to the ID 2020 agenda and is forcing us. I mean, essentially, it's not compulsory, but if you want to do anything, you kind of have to get the real ID. You kind of have to. Y'all, I refuse. I'm not doing it. I mean, my kids can't even get the real ID anyway. Okay. My children won't even qualify for a real ID. They don't have the documents that you need to take. So, you know, you have to take your birth certificate, your social security card. It's basically like going to get a passport. You have to bring 2 forms of proof of address. You got to take all this to the DMV with you now. Yeah. So with that said, you guys, I'm definitely going to get out of here. I've been so angry about this because my California ID expires on my birthday. And you guys know I'm a Leo. So my birthday is like in and around, you know, this month and next month. And I knew about the real ID. I knew about the global ID system. I didn't realize that it was so like now. I didn't realize that the ID 2020 Alliance, there was no more putting it off, that the firm date was 2020, and that in this country, we were finally going to get our national ID. I didn't realize that Microsoft had finally developed the global ID model and that they were starting to go ahead and pass that out to people. I didn't realize that our national ID system is a pilot system that almost every country in the world is a part of. To digitize ID so that your eye can be scanned or your fingerprint can be taken anywhere in the world. And they will have access to your American information. Like, there's so much I could say about this, y'all. It's just a lot to take in. And I'll be putting links in the description box, but it's a lot to take in. So I feel like, you know, it pisses me off, y'all. It makes me so mad when we use this space on YouTube to talk about like what Cardi B and Jermaine Dupri are fighting over. And, you know, who, you know, what Young Jock is doing on Love and Hip Hop. Like, I don't watch any of these shows, but like I watch other Black YouTubers and I know this is what other Black YouTubers are talking about. Whether a Black lady is being cast as Ariel, like all of this dumb stuff. And it literally makes me insane. And people say that my channel is boring, and it's probably boring because I want to sit here and read a freaking UN document. That is interesting to me. That is something I care about. That's why there's no TVs here. I don't have a flipping Netflix account. I don't care about that. I care about the fact that I have to get on a train or drive a car to get from here to there because the United States is participating in a pilot program for a global ID system. And so I don't want to talk about celebrity gossip. I want to read the flippin' UN document. I want to have a different kind of conversation. And I know it's not like fun and entertaining, it's not exciting, you know, it doesn't get your adrenaline going, but hopefully it gets your mind going. Like, this is insane. They can access your high school records by scanning your eyeball in Turkey? For real? How many of you guys signed up for that? That's all I want to know. How many of you guys signed up for that? I didn't. But that's where our country is right now. Like, this is getting real. The situation is getting very real. So I'll be curious to know, you know what, let me ask before I go, has anybody in the chat got their real ID yet? Has anybody already picked it up? I mean, somebody has to have already picked it up. Anybody in the chat? Have any of you guys gotten your real ID yet? I mean, I won't tell you guys not to get it because I live my life in a way that's really hard. You know, I don't use credit cards or credit of any kind. My children don't have birth certificates and social security cards. Like, life for me is definitely more difficult operating on a cash basis and, you know, kind of trying to live as outside of the system as I possibly can. Life for me is like not the easiest thing, right? So I can't try to impose like my personal way of living on other people. And I don't want to tell anybody, oh, you passed on it, Lamont? You won't be able to fly after October 2020 if you passed on the real ID. You will not be able to fly. And you won't be able to enter federal buildings. So, you know, I won't be getting the real ID, but you guys, I can't stop you guys. I will understand if you guys get the real ID. Because it is going to be impossible for you to do some things. I mean, heck, you may not even be able to vote without a real ID. It is a federal, like not on the federal level, you know, it is a federal document. So, I don't know. I'm like very bothered by this, but I also realize it's like watching a train wreck. Like, there's nothing I can say or do to stop this from happening. People are going to go along with this the same way they went along with social security cards, the same way they go along with birth certificates, the same way they go along with everything. We just go along with like the flow. We're caught up in a wave. Nobody's thinking. And we're going to look up and we're going to be global citizens. And it's going to happen much faster than we think because we just looked at the evidence today that this thing is on the move. And it's not a conspiracy and it's not something we have to guess about anymore. It's something the UN is discussing openly. It's something our country is participating in. It's something at your DMV office. It's something that Fortune magazine is talking about and that Microsoft is developing, has developed already. It's something that they're going to be giving to the refugees first, and then that information that's collected through our real ID will become part of a global identification system. And that's the blueprint. And so I really hope, you know, probably give it about 5 to 10 minutes to come up in the description box. But I really hope you guys educate yourselves on it, if nothing else. If you're going to be a part of this system, at least know what you're a part of. That's what I would say. Right, Snap Turtle, to live like that, you have to be self-sustainable. It's really hard, you guys. I didn't have a car for the longest time because I had to purchase my car cash. You know, all of the houses that I got, I inherited because I don't take out loans. I don't get earned income tax credit. You know, I don't get tax write-offs for my kids. I don't work for anybody. Like, I work for myself. I have to have a marketing skill. So you guys know YouTube's not my work, y'all, because I don't make any money off of YouTube. I probably make like $100 off of YouTube if I'm lucky, somewhere between like $50 and $100 a month. So, you know, I have to have other hustles. It's really hard. But for those people that are already participating in the system, what I will say is that you really, really should at least know what you're participating in. And for those Christians in the room, y'all, this is Revelation. So y'all, we are living in Revelation right now. Like you could knock me over with a feather. Like I cannot. Right, debt is slavery. Ryan, the Bible says the borrower is servant to the lender. And that scripture has always stuck in my head. So that means anything that I want, I've got to pay for it cash. Now, pretty soon they're going to stop taking cash, y'all. So what am I going to do? You know what I'm saying? Because ain't nobody about to scan my iris around this mug, all right? I'm going to be, look, that's why I make everything from scratch. I'm learning how to mill some flour. My son and I were joking that if it goes down, there's these little flowers by our house that are kind of like bowls. We know where to get water. Like my son and I crack jokes because it's real out here. It really is. So yeah. With that said, y'all, I'm going to get out of here. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.